Today we're going to be drawing and painting this lone tree using ink and watercolour and making it nice and wintry, so some wintry colours to give the feeling of some ice and snow. We're going to be using a hot press paper, which means it's nice and smooth, and the watercolours will just flow nicely over that. I haven't speeded up this video at all because I wanted to show you how quick it is and how easy it is to do something quite pleasing in such a short space of time. I'm going to be using one of my homemade dip pens, which is made from a twig. I have done a video showing you how to make these, although I do know that some of you have already made them and you've got some of your own to use. The great thing about the twig is that it gives you lots of different shapes and lines, so you get a lot of variety and the texture that we will get with something like a tree that we're drawing. And with the light shining through the trees, especially at this time of year in winter, you get these little gaps where they're perhaps bending over and they're narrower in places, and the light shining on one side and not the other, etc. So getting that variety of line using this rather than a uniform pen gives a much more exciting, interesting drawing. And you'll see that I've got a very light touch, and I allow the end of the pen, the nib of the twig if you like, to sort of twist and turn to get that variety that we talked about. You might notice that there's quite a blue tinge to my paper and the lighting in this video. When I was doing it, we'd had a very hard frost, and I sit next to the window and the windows were completely covered in frost. So it's given me that kind of blue icy feel over the whole video, which I'm very sorry about. I do really need to try and work on my lighting. I find if I have the lights too close to my work, they reflect off the wet medium, especially when you're using watercolour. And if I have them too far away, I haven't got the same intensity of light, so I'm not quite sure how to get around that. But usually if you've got a nice day, nice bright day outside and I'm near the window, it's absolutely fine. But like I say, the light was having to come through this ice, which was actually rather pretty, all the shapes on the window. I've drawn an imaginary tree here just out of my head. If you wanted to, you could use a reference photograph off the internet, or you could pop outside and do some sketches. Either way, try and keep it simple. Try and keep it in the centre of your page and make a feature of the one tree on its own. Once you've completed your drawing and you're happy with it, do let it dry completely before you put your paints on. So make sure your ink is completely dry, and the ink here that I've used is an acrylic ink and it's a black one. For my colours, I chose violet, peach and red. So the peach was made up of a red and a yellow. I didn't add any blue. I thought the violet was chilly enough on its own. Just to make it feel nice and wintry. But if you wanted to use slightly different colours, you could perhaps put some cerulean in there instead of the violet, and have a bit of a play with some cooler colours and see what you like. To one of the mixes of violet, I did add some burnt sienna to make more of a grey, just to have some shadows and some darker areas. Although the whole thing was kept quite light, I did let the paper shine through and really focus on the drawing and just have some very light washes put on quite quickly. But mix your colours up ready before you start with your painting. This paper is gummed all the way around, which means you can add plenty of water. So I added quite a splosh of water before I set off, and then we can work wet into wet, just adding those colours into each other. Use a nice big brush here. Don't be faffing around with lots of little brushes. Get yourself a big brush and stick to that one big brush. And just be nice and loose and let your arm go all the way across. Often sunsets or sunrises are kind of in those horizontal lines anyway, so that's a good way to work. With your painting, you can afford to be a little bit more abstract and impressionistic. Don't worry about covering up the whole page. Don't worry about leaving little chinks of white paper. You've got the form down there with the drawing, and this is the nice thing about ink and wash, is you've got a nice strong drawing and you've got your form there, and you just want to put some loose colour on just to give, like I say, the temperature, really make it feel nice and chilly, and add a little dash of colour and interest, but really the focus is on the drawing. So we don't need to be drawing with our paints, if that makes sense. Keep that big brush like I said before, and just pop the colours in together and let them move on the paper, let them move into each other. So once I've put all the colours on, you'll see a little bit later on in the video that I'll lift some off with a tissue. I do this to make a sun, and I also do this just to get some texture in there. The light will be bouncing around, especially as there's snow in the foreground, the light's going to be bouncing on that, and there may be some clouds in the sky. So if you have a crumpled up piece of tissue and just lightly move it across the paper or roll it slightly, don't put too much pressure on it, just, you know, experiment with this a bit and have a practice first. But if you just lightly move that tissue over the paper and lift a little bit of colour out, you can get some nice texture in there for things like snow and skies. So another thing that you can have a bit of a play and an experiment with on a piece of rough paper before you do your finished drawing, if you like. If you do struggle with lifting colour off your paper, it could be for several reasons. It may be that you've got a very inexpensive paper. This is a very good quality paper and it's very, very easy to lift the colours out of this paper. So that might be one thing. It may be that your painting is completely dry and that makes it more difficult. It doesn't make it impossible. You can still lift colour off when the paper's dry, but you won't be able to do this tissue effect once it's dry. So it needs to be still wet at this stage. So that's why we added water to begin with, to keep everything wet whilst we had this time to work. You'll see the whole thing takes less than 10 minutes. So you can see what you could achieve if you spent half an hour on something like this. And you could build on this idea. You could do lots more trees. You could do it for every season and change the colours, and obviously you'd have to put leaves on the tree, etc. But have a go with using the twigs for drawing trees, because I think they're a brilliant way of drawing trees. You get such a nice atmospheric feel to them with all the different shapes that you get in your lines, because it's nature and it's not uniform. So when we use ordinary pens that have a shaped nib that's just a uniform round shape, you're not going to get this texture and interest in your drawing. So I will link that video down below on how to make your dip pen if you haven't got one. I did mention before, this is an acrylic ink. I think it's a Dale Rowney one. I did take a picture of it, but I think I put that up before. But yeah, it's a Dale Rowney acrylic ink in black, and you can use different colours as well. So that just gives you an idea of what you can do in a very short period of time to get a real chilly, wintry feel and quite a pleasing little picture. As always, if you do have any questions, please do put them down in the comments below and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. In the meantime, enjoy your painting and drawing, have fun with this, and I'll see you again soon with another video. Bye bye for now.